This video is made for entertainment purposes only. My name is Marcus Holloway, and for 37 years, I wore the badge of a United States National Park Ranger. I walked the ancient forests of the Pacific Northwest, guided families through towering cathedral groves, and taught children about the delicate balance of wilderness ecosystems. I was trusted. I was respected. I was a liar. Not because I fabricated stories or misled the public about trail safety. Nothing so simple. I lied by omission. I hid evidence. I destroyed records. And I did it all to stay alive, to keep my job, and most importantly, to avoid the fate that befell every colleague who chose truth over survival. This is my confession. This is why I finally quit. And this is why everything you've been told about Bigfoot, about the absence of evidence, about the myth of Sasquatch, is a carefully orchestrated deception that reaches the highest levels of our government. But before I tell you about the policy, the disappearances, and the systematic suppression that's been happening since at least 1967, let me tell you about the day I found my first footprint. It was June of 1986. I was 24 years old, fresh out of training, assigned to the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest in Washington State. The old-timers called it the Deep Green, and they weren't being poetic. When you're 40 miles from the nearest road, standing in a forest where the canopy is so thick that noon looks like dusk, you understand what true wilderness means. I was on a routine boundary survey near the Canadian border, tedious work that involved GPS coordinates, trail markers, and endless hours of solitude. That's when I saw it. A footprint. Clear. Undeniable. Pressed deep into the muddy bank of a creek I'd been following. It was 18 inches long, maybe 7 inches wide. 5 distinct toes, visible dermal ridges in the mud, a pressure pattern that showed weight distribution, heel strike, mid-foot compression, toe push-off. This wasn't a carved wooden foot pressed into soft earth. This wasn't a hoax. This was biological. This was real. My training kicked in immediately. I photographed it from multiple angles. I took measurements. I made a plaster cast using the emergency dental stone I carried for exactly this kind of fossil or track documentation. I tagged the location with precise coordinates. I did everything right. That night, back at the ranger station, I couldn't sleep. I kept looking at the photographs, at the cast drying on my desk. The rational part of my brain offered explanations. Bear track distorted by melting, human footprint altered by water flow, but none of them fit. The morphology was wrong. The depth was wrong. The biomechanics were wrong. I wasn't a cryptozoologist. I wasn't even particularly interested in Bigfoot mythology. But I was a scientist by training, and I knew evidence when I saw it. The next morning, I approached my supervisor, Bill Kendrick. Bill was 52, a 28-year veteran of the Park Service, weathered and cautious. I showed him the photographs, the cast, my documentation. He stared at them for a long time. Too long. Then he looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Concern? Fear? Resignation? You planning to file this officially? He asked quietly. Of course, I said. This is significant biological evidence. This could be. Don't. His voice was flat, hard. Don't file it. Don't show it to anyone else. And for God's sake, Marcus, don't send it to the Department of the Interior. I laughed. I actually laughed, thinking he was joking. Bill, if there's an undiscovered species. There's nothing undiscovered about it. He stood up, closed the door to his office, and pulled down the window shade. Sit down, Marcus. We need to talk about the rules nobody tells you during training. What Bill told me that morning changed everything I thought I knew about the Park Service, about government transparency, and about the nature of truth in institutional systems. He told me about official DOI Internal Directive 827B, issued in 1967, just months after the famous Patterson-Gimlin film was shot in Northern California. The directive was never made public. It was never released through FOIA requests. It existed in a special classification that technically didn't exist in civilian agencies, administratively restricted for personnel safety. The directive was simple in its brutality. Any Park Service employee who submits official documentation of Sasquatch evidence will be immediately placed on administrative leave pending psychiatric evaluation. Continued insistence on the validity of such evidence will result in termination for mental health concerns affecting job performance, or, in extreme cases, involuntary commitment for observation. "You think I'm exaggerating," Bill said, watching my face. "You think this sounds like conspiracy theory nonsense." "It sounds illegal," I managed. "You can't institutionalize someone for filing a report." "You can if you control the narrative," Bill said. "You can if you have psychiatrists on payroll who will diagnose anything you want them to diagnose. And you can especially if you've done it successfully for 20 years without a single case reaching public attention." He pulled out a notebook, handwritten, worn, pages yellowing. "These are names," he said. "Rangers, biologists, Forest Service personnel. All of them filed official reports about Sasquatch evidence between 1967 and 1985. All of them disappeared from their positions within weeks." I took the notebook with shaking hands. There were 43 names. Next to each name was a fate. Thomas Brennan, 1968. Psychiatric leave, involuntary commitment, St. Elizabeth's Hospital, D.C., released 1973, never returned to service. Linda Cho, 1971. Administrative leave, diagnosis, delusional disorder, forcibly retired. Robert Halifax, 1974. Filed report with Smithsonian, transferred to Alaska, missing person case opened 1975, never found. Catherine Morales, 1979. Submitted tissue samples to FBI, psychiatric hold, released after 6 months, career destroyed, suicide 1982. The list went on, and on, and on. "This is insane," I whispered. "This is policy," Bill corrected. "And it's enforced at the highest levels. You want to know why there's no official scientific evidence for Sasquatch? This is why. Anyone who finds it and tries to report it gets disappeared. Not killed, that would be too obvious. Just systematically destroyed, discredited, erased from professional life." "But why?" I asked. "Why would the government suppress evidence of a species?" Bill shook his head. "That's the question I've been asking for 28 years. My best guess? Liability. Legal implications. If Sasquatch exists, if it's proven to be an intelligent species or even just a rare primate, the entire system of public land management collapses. Logging contracts, mining rights, development permits. All of it would be subject to Endangered Species Act protections so strict that trillions of dollars in economic activity would halt overnight." He gestured at the cast on my desk. "That footprint represents an existential threat to the Department of the Interior, the Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and every corporate interest that's been extracting resources from public lands for a century. So they made a choice: deny, suppress, destroy." "And the people who wouldn't cooperate?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Like I said, they disappeared." Bill stood up, handed me back my cast, my photographs. "So here's your choice, Marcus. You can file that report. You can insist on proper scientific documentation. You can demand transparency and accountability. And you will be gone within a month. Or—" He paused, looking older than his years. "Or you can do what I've done. You can document everything. You can collect evidence. You can build the largest private archive of Sasquatch evidence in North America. And you can keep it hidden, keep it safe, until the day comes when you can release it without destroying yourself in the process." I looked down at the plaster cast in my hands. Perfect toes, perfect dermal ridges, perfect proof of something extraordinary. "How much evidence do you have?" I asked quietly. Bill smiled, but it was a sad smile, the smile of a man carrying a secret that weighed more than mountains. "Come back tonight," he said. "After the other rangers go home. I'll show you." Bill Kendrick's house was 30 miles from the ranger station, deep in private forest land that his family had owned for 3 generations. It was isolated, intentionally so. When I arrived that evening, he was waiting on the porch. "Before we go inside," he said, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to show you isn't just evidence. It's my life's work. It's 28 years of risk, of lying to supervisors, of hiding the truth from the institution I swore to serve. If you see this, you become complicit. You become part of the cover-up. There's no going back. I thought about the footprint in my trunk. I thought about Catherine Morales, who killed herself after being destroyed for telling the truth. I thought about all the choices that lead a person to a moment like this. "Show me," I said. We went inside. Bill led me past the living room, past the kitchen, to a door I'd assumed was a closet. He unlocked it, 3 separate locks, I noticed, and revealed a staircase leading down. The basement had been converted into something between a natural history museum and a forensics laboratory. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, shelves of journals, boxes labeled with dates and locations. A long workbench held microscopes, casting materials, audio analysis equipment. And everywhere, there was evidence. Plaster casts lined an entire wall. Hundreds of them. Footprints ranging from 14 inches to 22 inches, showing individual variation, showing different pressure patterns, showing what could only be interpreted as different individuals, different ages, different gaits. "I've catalogued over 400 distinct prints," Bill said quietly, "from 17 different locations across Washington, Oregon, and Northern California. Each one documented, photographed, GPS tagged. Each one unmistakably non-human, unmistakably primate, unmistakably real." He moved to another shelf. Hair samples. Dozens of vials, each labeled with forensic precision. Hair samples from 43 separate encounters. I've had them independently analyzed by 3 different labs, never giving them context, just asking for species identification. Every single one came back as unknown primate. Not bear. Not human. Not any catalogued species. Unknown. I picked up one of the vials. The hair inside was reddish-brown, coarse, 3 inches long. "What about DNA?" I asked. "Contamination issues," Bill said. "Or so the labs claim. But I have samples preserved in sterile conditions, waiting for the day when I can submit them to a lab that won't report me to the DOI." He led me to the audio equipment. Reel-to-reel tapes, dozens of them, later cassettes, newer digital recordings. "Vocalizations," he said, playing one. The sound that filled the room was unlike anything I'd ever heard. Part howl, part scream, part something that sounded almost linguistic. It raised the hair on the back of my neck. I've recorded 86 distinct vocal events. None of them match any known North American wildlife. I've had acoustic specialists analyze them off the record. They say the vocal range, the complexity, the patterns, they suggest language. Not just communication. Language. I was overwhelmed. This wasn't a collection of ambiguous blob squatch photos and third-hand stories. This was decades of scientific evidence, systematically gathered, meticulously documented, hidden from the world because revealing it meant professional suicide. "Why haven't you gone public?" I asked. "Anonymous release? Media contact?" "I tried," Bill said quietly. "In 1978, I contacted a journalist at the Washington Post. Investigative reporter, respected, known for taking on government cover-ups. I sent him photocopies of some of my evidence, some of the documentation about disappeared rangers. Nothing that could be traced back to me. What happened? The story never ran. The journalist stopped returning my calls. 6 months later, I saw him at a conference in Seattle. He saw me, turned pale, and walked away. Later, someone who knew him told me he'd been visited by federal agents. Told that pursuing the story would be problematic for national security. He dropped it. Smart man. Bill sat down heavily on a stool near the workbench. That's when I realized the suppression isn't just DOI policy. It's multi-agency. It's coordinated. And it's not going to end because one ranger has evidence. It ends when the evidence is so overwhelming, so undeniable, and so publicly released that they can't suppress it anymore. He looked at me. "That's the work, Marcus. That's what I'm asking you to join. Not public revelation. Not heroic whistleblowing. Just patient, careful, systematic documentation. Building an archive so complete, so scientifically rigorous, that when the right moment comes, when the political climate changes, when the old guard retires, when the system cracks, we have everything ready. I looked around the basement, at the evidence of something extraordinary, at the proof of something that wasn't supposed to exist, at the life's work of a man who'd chosen truth over career, evidence over safety, hope over despair. I'm in, I said. The next 31 years of my life were defined by a double existence. By day, I was Ranger Marcus Holloway, competent, reliable, trusted by supervisors, beloved by visitors, the face of the National Park Service. By night, I was a secret archivist, a hidden scientist, a collector of forbidden evidence. Bill retired in 1993. Before he left, he transferred the entire archive to me, physically moved it, piece by piece, to a basement I'd built in my own home. He gave me his notebooks, his contacts, his methods. He gave me the burden he'd carried for 35 years. Don't let it consume you, he said the day he left. I spent my whole life on this. My marriage ended because of it. My kids don't speak to me. Don't make my mistakes, Marcus. Have a life. But keep the archive alive. I tried to balance it. I got married in 1995. Lisa, a teacher, smart and patient. I never told her about the archive. How could I? How do you explain to someone you love that you're hiding evidence of a cryptid in your basement, that your entire career is built on a lie, that you're one report away from psychiatric commitment? The evidence kept coming. Every season, I'd find something new. In 1997, I discovered a cache of structures in a remote valley. Shelters made of woven branches, too sophisticated for random deadfall, too large for any known animal. I photographed them. I documented them. I added them to the archive. In 2001, I found a complete handprint pressed into clay near a stream. 5 fingers, opposable thumb, dermal ridges. I made 3 casts. Filed nothing official. Hid it in my basement. In 2004, I recorded vocalizations that still haunt me. A series of calls and responses between what sounded like 2 individuals, modulating in tone and rhythm in ways that suggested intentional communication. My audio analysis showed patterns consistent with syntax. I kept it secret. Other rangers contributed, too. Not directly, they didn't know about me specifically, but through the network Bill had established. Anonymous drops of photographs, coordinates scribbled on napkins, whispered conversations in bars after shifts. There were dozens of us, all collecting, all hiding, all waiting. And we watched what happened to those who didn't hide. In 2007, a young ranger named Marcus Delacroix, no relation, but the name similarity always bothered me, submitted an official report about multiple footprints and a brief visual sighting in Olympic National Park. He was thorough, professional, careful. 3 weeks later, he was placed on administrative leave for mental health concerns. 2 months later, he was institutionally committed for observation. 6 months later, he was released with a diagnosis of stress-induced delusional disorder and a medical discharge. I called him off the record years later. He was working as a grocery store manager in Idaho, his ranger career destroyed, his reputation in ruins. They had psychiatrists, he told me, voice hollow. Federal psychiatrists. They asked me questions designed to make me sound crazy. Do you think the government is hiding Bigfoot? Do you believe you're being persecuted for telling the truth? No matter how I answered, they twisted it. In the end, I signed papers just to get out. Just to make it stop. Did you see it? I asked. Was it real? There was a long pause. I saw it, Marcus. Clear as day. 40 feet away. It was real. And they destroyed me for it. That was 2009. After that call, I worked even harder on the archive. I owed it to Marcus Delacroix. I owed it to Catherine Morales, who'd killed herself. I owed it to all the rangers who'd been disappeared, discredited, erased. By 2015, my archive contained a 1,247 distinct footprint casts, 89 hair samples, a 127 audio recordings, 43 photographic encounters, most ambiguous, some strikingly clear, a 16 video clips, brief, shaky, but showing large bipedal figures, a hundreds of pages of field notes, GPS coordinates, witness testimonies, a documentation of 67 rangers and Forest Service personnel who'd been disappeared or destroyed for reporting evidence. It was the largest private collection of Sasquatch evidence in the world. And it was illegal. Not officially. There's no law against collecting wildlife evidence. But under DOI policy, possessing this material without reporting it was grounds for termination. Every day, I lived with the fear of discovery. Every inspection, every supervisor visit, every audit was a potential exposure. I developed anxiety. I started having nightmares. Lisa noticed. "You're not sleeping," she said one night in 2016. "You're distracted. You're carrying something heavy, Marcus." "What is it?" I wanted to tell her. God, I wanted to tell her. But I'd seen what happened to families when the truth came out. I'd read about Catherine Morales' husband, who'd lost his wife to suicide and his home to debt after her forced retirement. I'd talked to rangers whose marriages collapsed under the weight of secrecy and paranoia. "Just work stress," I lied. "Budget cuts. Politics." She didn't believe me. We started growing apart. By 2018, we were sleeping in separate rooms. By 2019, she'd filed for divorce. "I don't know who you are anymore," she said the day she left. "You're not the man I married. You're hiding something, Marcus. And whatever it is, it's more important to you than I am." She was right. And I hated that she was right. The archive had consumed me, just like Bill had warned. But I couldn't stop. Because every time I thought about quitting, about destroying the evidence and living a normal life, I thought about the truth. I thought about an intelligent species living hidden in our forests, dismissed as myth, while the government systematically destroyed anyone who tried to prove otherwise. That's not just suppression. That's not just policy. That's a crime against science, against truth, against the very principle that we're supposed to follow the evidence wherever it leads. So I kept going. Alone. Isolated. Obsessed. And then, in the spring of 2023, everything changed. It was early May. I was 61 years old, planning to retire in 2 years, planning to finally release the archive to a trusted contact I'd been cultivating, a cryptozoologist with legal protections and media connections who could handle the exposure without being destroyed. I was on a remote patrol in the North Cascades, 90 miles from the nearest town, in terrain so rugged that most hikers never ventured there. It was late afternoon. I was following an old game trail, cataloging wolf scat for the Wildlife Survey database, when I smelled it. The smell hit me first. Musky, organic, powerful. Not quite like bear, not quite like any animal I knew. It was the smell that dozens of witnesses had reported, the smell that accompanied sightings, the smell that I'd read about in Bill's notes but never experienced myself. My heart started pounding. I unslung my camera, switched it to video mode, and moved slowly forward. That's when I saw it. It was crouched by a stream, maybe 60 feet away, partially obscured by undergrowth. At first, my brain tried to rationalize it. Bear, person in a costume, trick of the light. But then it stood up. 8 feet tall. Maybe more. Covered in reddish-brown hair. Massively broad shoulders. Arms that hung past its knees. It turned slightly, and I saw its face. Flat, broad, undeniably primate, undeniably not human. Not a gorilla face. Not a chimpanzee face. Something else. Something in between. It was real. After 37 years of collecting other people's evidence, I was looking at living, breathing proof. I raised the camera. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. I started recording. The creature bent down, scooped water in cupped hands. Hands, not paws, hands with opposable thumbs, and drank. It was calm, unhurried, unaware of me. I kept filming. Then it froze. Its head snapped up. It was looking directly at me. We made eye contact. I will never forget that moment. Its eyes were dark, intelligent, assessing. Not animal eyes. Something more. There was awareness there, consciousness, thought. It didn't charge. It didn't vocalize. It just looked at me for what felt like an eternity but was probably 5 seconds. Then it turned and moved into the forest. Not crashing, not running in panic, but moving with fluid grace, navigating the terrain with the ease of something that belonged there. I stood frozen, camera still recording empty forest, until my hands started shaking so badly I had to lower the camera. I had it. Clear footage. Close range. Unambiguous. I sat down on a log and cried. Not from fear. From relief. From vindication. From the overwhelming weight of 37 years of secrecy suddenly validated by 60 seconds of video. Bill was right. Catherine Morales was right. Marcus Delacroix was right. They'd all been right. And they'd all been destroyed for it. I played back the video on my camera's screen. There it was. Clear as day. Undeniable. And in that moment, I had to make the choice that dozens of rangers before me had made. The choice that had destroyed careers, ended marriages, ruined lives. Report it or hide it. I thought about Marcus Delacroix working in a grocery store. I thought about Catherine Morales' suicide. I thought about Bill's warning, "You will be gone within a month." I thought about Lisa, already gone, already divorced, already a casualty of the secret I'd kept. And I thought about the creature I'd just seen, living in these forests for thousands of years, hidden, persecuted when discovered, dismissed as myth while evidence piled up in basements and safes across the Pacific Northwest. I made my choice. I encrypted the video. I backed it up to 3 separate secure drives. I added it to the archive. And I drove back to the ranger station, filed my routine patrol report with no mention of the encounter, and went home to my empty house. The video should have been enough. It should have been the capstone of the archive, the final piece of evidence, the smoking gun. But it wasn't enough for me. Because seeing the creature in person changed something fundamental. It stopped being an abstract question of evidence and suppression. It became personal. That creature was real. It was intelligent. It was living in territory that we were actively destroying. Logging, development, climate change, human encroachment. And our government had spent 56 years systematically suppressing evidence of its existence. Not for national security. Not for public safety. For money. For logging contracts and mining rights and corporate profits. I started drinking. Not heavily, but enough. Enough to sleep. Enough to stop thinking about intelligent eyes looking back at me from the forest. Work became unbearable. Every visitor I guided through the forest, every cheerful talk about wilderness preservation, every official report that carefully omitted the truth, it was all a lie. I was complicit in a lie that had destroyed dozens of careers and hidden an entire species from scientific understanding. In August of 2023, something happened that pushed me to the edge. A young ranger, 26 years old, Emma Vasquez, brilliant and passionate about wildlife biology, came to me with photographs. Clear photographs. A juvenile creature, she thought, maybe 5 feet tall, photographed at close range in Olympic National Forest. "I know this sounds crazy," she said, excited, barely able to contain herself. "But I think I might have photographic evidence of a juvenile Sasquatch. Look at the morphology. Look at the foot structure. This isn't a bear cub. This isn't a person. This is—" "Don't file it," I said immediately. She stared at me. "What?" "Don't file an official report. Don't submit the photographs. Don't tell anyone else." "But Marcus, this is incredible. This is—" "Emma." I grabbed her shoulders, looked her in the eyes. "If you file this, your career is over. They will destroy you. They will put you on psychiatric hold. They will diagnose you with delusional disorder. They will erase you from the Park Service. I have seen it happen to dozens of rangers. Please, trust me. Don't file it." She pulled away, looking at me like I'd lost my mind. "You're serious. Dead serious. But that's insane. That's conspiracy theory nonsense. We're scientists. If there's evidence—" "There are rules," I said quietly. "Rules they don't tell you in training. Rules that protect the institution, not the truth. If you don't believe me, look up Directive 827B. Look up what happened to Marcus Delacroix in 2007. Look up Catherine Morales, Linda Cho, Thomas Brennan. Look up any ranger who filed a Sasquatch report in the last 50 years and see where they are now." Emma looked at me for a long time. I could see the conflict in her face, excitement warring with fear, truth warring with self-preservation. "What did you do?" she asked finally. "When you found evidence, what did you do?" I almost told her. I almost revealed the archive, brought her into the secret network, made her part of the hidden resistance. But I remembered Bill's warning. I remembered my own destroyed marriage. I remembered the weight of 37 years of secrets. "I hid it," I said. "And I survived." Emma left my office. She never filed the report. But she also never looked at me the same way again. I'd shattered something for her. The belief that our institution valued truth, that science mattered more than politics, that doing the right thing would be rewarded rather than punished. 2 weeks later, she transferred to a desk position in D.C. 3 months later, she quit the Park Service entirely. I'd saved her career by destroying her faith in the system. That's when I knew I couldn't do it anymore. September 2023. I requested a meeting with the regional director, my ultimate supervisor, a political appointee with connections to the Department of the Interior. "I'm submitting my resignation," I said. "Effective immediately. After 37 years, I'm done." He was shocked. "Marcus, you're 2 years from retirement with full benefits. Why would you?" "Personal reasons," I said. "Is this about your divorce?" "Because we have counseling resources." "It's about integrity," I interrupted. "It's about spending 37 years lying for an institution that punishes truth-tellers and rewards complicity. It's about evidence I've been hiding because reporting it would have destroyed my career. It's about choosing between my conscience and my comfort, and finally, choosing conscience." He stared at me. "What evidence?" This was it. The moment. I could walk away quietly, retire with pension intact, live out my remaining years in comfortable silence. Or I could tell the truth and accept the consequences. "Sasquatch evidence," I said. "Thousands of pieces. 37 years' worth. Footprints, hair samples, audio recordings, video footage. All hidden, because Directive 827B makes it career suicide to report." His face went pale, then hard. "Marcus, I'm going to recommend you take medical leave before making any permanent decisions. You're clearly under stress." "Don't." I stood up. "Don't patronize me. Don't pretend you don't know about the directive. Don't pretend you haven't seen it happen to other rangers. I'm resigning. Effective immediately. And when I walk out of this office, I'm taking my evidence with me. All of it. If you go public with unsubstantiated claims." "They're not unsubstantiated. They're meticulously documented. And I'm not going public through official channels. I'm going to find journalists, scientists, cryptozoologists who can't be threatened by the DOI. I'm going to release everything. And you're going to have to explain why the Park Service has been suppressing evidence of a species for half a century." He reached for his phone. "I need to make some calls." "Make whatever calls you want," I said. "I'll be clearing out my desk." I walked out. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But for the first time in 37 years, I felt free. They tried to stop me. Of course they tried. Within an hour of my resignation, I received a call from a DOI attorney. Threats of legal action if I released proprietary information gathered during federal employment. Reminders that I'd signed confidentiality agreements. Warnings about the consequences of defamatory claims against federal agencies. I hung up. 2 days later, 2 men in suits appeared at my door. They identified themselves as consultants with the Department of the Interior. They wanted to have a conversation about my resignation and my intentions. I refused to let them. "Mr. Holloway," one of them said through the closed door, "we're prepared to offer you a very generous settlement package. Full retirement benefits, enhanced pension, medical coverage. All you have to do is sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding any unusual evidence you may have collected during your service." "No," I said. "Mr. Holloway, we can make this very difficult for you." "You already made it difficult," I said. "You made it difficult for 37 years. You made it difficult for every ranger who chose truth over career. You made it difficult for Catherine Morales, who killed herself because you destroyed her life. So no. No settlement. No NDA. No silence." They left. But the harassment continued. Phone calls at odd hours. Cars parked outside my house. Legal threats. I documented all of it. Added it to the archive. And then I started the release process. I contacted cryptozoologists first. Researchers who'd spent their lives investigating Sasquatch, who had legal protections, who couldn't be institutionalized or fired. I sent them encrypted samples of the evidence. Not everything, not yet, but enough to prove I was serious. The response was overwhelming. Within weeks, I had secure channels established with 3 major cryptozoology organizations, 2 independent journalists, and a documentary filmmaker. I contacted scientists next. Wildlife biologists, primatologists, anthropologists, researchers with tenure protections, with reputations solid enough to withstand institutional pressure. I was careful, selective, but I found allies. In November 2023, the first public release happened. A peer-reviewed paper in a fringe but legitimate journal analyzing hair samples from my archive. The conclusion: unknown primate species, morphologically distinct from all catalogued North American fauna. The DOI issued an immediate statement dismissing the paper as unscientific sensationalism based on improperly sourced materials. But the cat was out of the bag. In December, a documentary short was released featuring some of my audio recordings and photographic evidence. It went viral. Millions of views. Mainstream media coverage. The DOI tried to discredit me. They issued statements about my resignation under concerning circumstances, my unsubstantiated claims, my unfortunate decline in mental health. But I'd planned for this. I released documentation of every ranger who'd been disappeared. I released evidence of Directive 827B. I released legal threats I'd received, harassment I'd documented, proof of systematic suppression. And other rangers came forward. Dozens of them. Not with evidence. Most had been too afraid to collect it, but with stories, testimonies, patterns of suppression, threats, and institutional intimidation. The media narrative shifted. It wasn't crazy ex-ranger makes Bigfoot claims anymore. It became government suppression of scientific evidence, and whistleblower reveals decades of institutional cover-up. In January 2024, 3 members of Congress announced they were launching an investigation into DOI policies regarding cryptid evidence and the treatment of Park Service whistleblowers. In February, the DOI quietly rescinded Directive 827B. In March, the Smithsonian Institution announced it was accepting my entire archive for scientific analysis, the first time a major mainstream scientific institution had agreed to seriously study Sasquatch evidence. It's October 2024 now. Almost a year since I resigned. The analysis of my archive is ongoing. Preliminary results are striking. The hair samples contain DNA that's 96.4% similar to human DNA, closer than chimpanzees, closer than any known primate. But different enough to suggest a distinct species, possibly a surviving population of Homo relatives that diverged from our lineage hundreds of thousands of years ago. The footprint casts show consistent morphological patterns across decades and geographic regions, suggesting a real biological population rather than hoaxes. The audio recordings contain vocalizations with complexity and pattern structures consistent with language, Not just communication, but actual linguistic structure. The video footage I captured, now analyzed by movement specialists and primatologists, shows locomotion patterns inconsistent with any known ape or human in costume. The gait mechanics, the muscle movement visible beneath hair, the way the creature navigated terrain, it's biological, not theatrical. We don't have full proof yet. We don't have a body, we don't have a captured specimen, we don't have unambiguous mainstream scientific consensus. But we have more evidence than has ever been publicly available before. And critically, we have a documented pattern of government suppression that explains why this evidence hasn't been taken seriously before now. The creature I saw by that stream, that intelligent, aware being, might finally be recognized. Not as a myth, not as a joke, but as a real, endangered, remarkable species that's been sharing our forests for thousands of years while we systematically denied its existence. People ask me if it was worth it. If destroying my career, my marriage, my financial security was worth it for evidence that's still being debated, still being questioned, still not fully accepted by mainstream science. I think about Bill Kendrick, who gave me the archive and the burden that came with it. He died in 2019, never seeing the evidence go public, never seeing the suppression acknowledged. I think about Catherine Morales, who killed herself after being destroyed for telling the truth. I think about Marcus Delacroix, working in a grocery store, his dreams destroyed. I think about Emma Vasquez, who quit the Park Service because she couldn't reconcile the institution's values with its practices. And I think about that creature by the stream, looking at me with intelligent eyes, living in a world that insists it doesn't exist. Was it worth it? Yes. Because truth matters. Because evidence matters. Because we don't get to pick and choose which scientific discoveries we accept based on economic convenience or institutional comfort. Because an entire species shouldn't be erased from recognition because acknowledging it would be financially complicated. Because Catherine Morales deserved better than suicide and oblivion. Because every ranger who was disappeared, discredited, institutionalized, or destroyed deserved justice. I'm 62 years old. I have no pension, no savings, and a legal battle that will probably last the rest of my life. The DOI is trying to seize my archive, claiming it's government property. I'm fighting them in court. But I sleep at night now. For the first time in 37 years, I sleep. Because I'm not lying anymore. Because the evidence is public. Because the suppression is documented. Because the truth, however uncomfortable, however complicated, however inconvenient, is finally being told. My name is Marcus Holloway. I was a national park ranger for 37 years. I hid evidence of Sasquatch because reporting it would have destroyed my career and possibly my freedom. This is my confession. This is why I quit. And this is why everything you've been told about the absence of Bigfoot evidence is a lie built on systematic suppression, institutional cowardice, and the willingness of good people to hide the truth rather than sacrifice their comfort. The evidence is real. The creature is real. The suppression was real. And now, finally, the truth is real too.